bones are going to create literally the backbone of this character, and generally for games and film, bones are joints, whichever you call them, really are the foundations of creature setup. To find the bones menu, the best place to go in 3ds Max is to animation, and if you click on this and then scroll right down, you can find the bone tools. In this popped out window, this rollout, you can pretty much find access to everything that you're going to need when working with bones. There's also another way to get there, and if you go across to the Create tab and I'll come across to Systems, you can see that you can create bones from this menu as well. I generally don't use it from here, and I just use this rollout purely because I get more options than what I do when I click in here. You can see that, I get some IK chain solver assignment, which I never actually use. I can change the name and color before I actually create it, which I don't see a point for. And then the bone parameter is literally, it's just copying out what we have in Fin Adjustment Tools right now. So not much extra, well, nothing extra at all. And I really honestly just don't use this at all. I just use this menu here, which is great. You can see as well that when I click Create Bones here, it actually highlights on bones here as well on this side, and vice versa, I think. So if we go back here and click, these two highlight, because pretty much it's the same thing. So before I go and place some bones, I just want to make sure that I'm working on my work in progress layer. So if I open my manage layers up, you can see that I'm in control at the moment. So I'm just going to click this little guy here and make sure that I'm working on the work in progress. So from a side viewport, I'm going to hit F3, which is just going to let me see a wireframe model of the character. And I'm going to try and place my joints relatively in the center of the geometry, and this is so that we can get squash and stretch, because he's a cartoony character. I like my squash and stretch to come from the direct center of the character most of the time anyway. So I'm thinking that we'll have a pretty static head. He's not going to really squish too much in the head area. The spine's going to be pretty stretchy, so from around about this loop here down to the back tail, I think we're going to need some joints in here, so maybe about 5. And then we'll add a joint for the upper and lower tail fins, one for the upper dorsal fin, and of course the 2 side fins will get a bone each. And we'll just not worry about the eyes for the moment, so what we can actually do is jump back into the layers. Let's find these IGO and just hide them for now. I think that'll make things easier while we're looking at the rig. And just close that down. So back in the side view, let's just create some bones. Let's see how this goes right now. So I'm just going to click Create Bones, and I'm going to run from the center on this line here, and I'm going to left click once. I'm going to left click at the end of the nose, and you'll notice it's going to draw out another bone. If you were to left click again, it'll continue the bone chain, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click. That's going to create a nub bone, as you can see there, and that's just going to end that bone chain, which is cool. That's exactly what I want. So I'm just going to right click once more. That's just going to end that tool. So I think this is cool, a cool placement for the head to rotate from this point. That's fine with me. So let's go in and start creating the spine. To do the spine, I'll do it a bit differently. I want 5 bones equally spaced apart pretty much. So let's jump back into my layers, and I'm just going to hide geometry fully so we can just see what we're working on right now, the work in progress layer. Let's close that down. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump across to the helper menu, and I'm going to create a point helper. So I'm just going to click point and click in the scene. And I don't want the box on this, so I'm just going to turn off the box, and this cross is just fine, and I'm going to just knock this down to 0.1 rather than 0.2. And I'll just right click to end the tool. And with that done, I'm going to align it to this bone, and I can do that really easily by holding down shift and pressing A, and you'll notice that I get a new cursor on the screen. And if I mouse over onto bone 1 and just click, you notice that jumps across. So that's just a quick align tool, an easy way to get to it. Let's turn back on the geometry, back into the layers, just turn that on. In my left viewport, I'm going to now move this. I'm going to hold down shift and move, and this is just going to copy it, and I'm going to copy it to where I think I want the end of the spine chain to be. So around about here is fine. And I'm just going to copy this object and go OK. Cool. With that done, I can then turn off the geometry again. I don't need to see it for the moment. And I'm going to duplicate this guy once more. So I'll just copy, shift, and move. And let's do it again. And one more on this side. Cool. So to get even spacing, it's pretty simple. We're going to use a constraint, which would normally be used in a rig, but we'll use it in a funky way just to rig this up so that we get an exact spacing between. So let's grab this central one. Let's go to Animation, Constraints, Position Constraint, and Position Constraint to this first locator that we created. And you'll notice that in its the position, rotation, scale parameters, we've got position list with a position constraint. And here, if we just scroll down, I can add another position constraint to this as well, which I'm going to do, another position target. Just going to turn that on. I'm going to click this end point. And you'll see that it jumps to the center, which is cool. It's exactly what I want. If I move around this end point now, you can see that it's evenly spaced between the two. And that's exactly what I was wanting, just to get an even spacing so that I can put my joints down and align them to these locators that I'm creating. So for these guys, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to grab this guy, Animation, Constraints, Position Constraint to the first one. Scroll this down a bit. I'm just going to add a new position. Instead of adding this end one, which will jump into the center, I'm just going to grab the center one. So it's going to give me an even spacing, if I turn this back off, between this guy and this guy. This one in the middle is going to give me an even spacing. So I can do that for the end one as well, but using these three rather than the two at the beginning here. So let's do that really quick. Let's go to Animation, Constraint, Position. Let's jump to the center one. Add a position target to the end one. And just turn that off. Alright, awesome. So if we move this end one, you can see we've got even spacing between all of these. And you know what? That's going to be perfectly fine if I turn on my geometry. That looks good already. That's exactly where I want it. Let's just reposition a tiny bit. Turn off my geometry. Okay, that's great. I'm going to move this joint out of the way just in case it gets confused. Sometimes this tool will get confused if you add more bones, even if you don't have this selected. It might try and attach it to this bone chain, and I don't want that to happen. So let's move this away. I can always quick align, so remember Shift and then A. I can just quick align it back down, and I'll keep it same orientation, which is fine. So back to create bones. I'm going to turn on snaps at the top here. I'm just going to right click on this to give me some options, and to the pivot point is perfectly fine. That's what I was wanting. So if you don't have that, make sure to turn on pivot and turn everything else off. Let's close that down. And I'm going to create my bone chain going from this side all the way to the end of this one here. So 1, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Right click to give me the nub, and I'm going to right click again just to end the tool. So we don't quite have 5 joints, 5 bones, we've got 4 of them, 1 at the end. That's perfectly fine, that's cool with me. So let's move these out the way, grab them and delete them. I don't need them anymore. And I'm just going to use Shift and A just to align that back down to there. So that's cool. Alright, let's turn back on the geometry and start creating some more bones around here. So create bones. Let's make one for this fin up here. Really easy. Let's make one for this. Make sure the tool's on. Perfect. And let's make one down here as well. Alright, so for this fin here, I'm going to create it in a side viewport, but this is going to take some editing, so that's fine. So let's move to perspective. Let's move to this top joint and just move it along. Let's put this on X-ray, so Alt and X for X-ray. See where this bone's actually going to be positioned. Looks good to me. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn on bone edit mode. That's going to allow me to move this bottom one and affect the orientation of this of the parent joint to it. So if I try and move this right now, you'll notice it just rotates around. I don't want it to rotate so much. I actually just want to move this bottom one. So you can see with bone edit mode on, I can actually have a better freedom of moving around. What this does do, unfortunately, is it messes up the orientation of this end nub bone that I'm actually moving. So what I have to do is get this in position, and that looks pretty good to me. Turn off bone edit mode, and then delete this nub by hitting the delete key, grabbing this bone that's left and just doing create end. That'll create an end on here, which is fine. And that's our joints just about set up. We just need one on the other side, so I'm just going to double click this top guy, and that's going to select both of them, or you can marquee select. And I'm just going to hit mirror. Oh, I'm just going to no to that. So it's saying one of more of these nodes are not bones. That's because I've got the geometry selected as well. Silly me, so I'll cancel that. Let's grab both of these bones, and I'm just going to hit mirror. And you can see that's mirrored across OK. So I'm just going to OK that. And in the X, I'm just going to take that from a negative to a positive. So just remove that negative, hit enter, and it jumps across to the other side. So that's our bone set up. And now in the next video, we'll connect them together.